G'day mate, 40 here. So Axios has been running a series of thoughtful, in-depth columns on what's going to happen when Donald Trump is elected president. How's that going to affect healthcare, immigration, the courts, foreign policy? Axios predicts that Trump will give Israel whatever weapons it wants to finish off its war with Hamas, Hezbollah, and Iran. That if Donald Trump is elected president, this will likely be joined with Republicans retaking the US Senate and holding House of Representatives. So Donald Trump would have a pretty strong, Republicans would have a pretty strong hold on power. So I'm not seeing nearly as many thoughtful columns on what would happen if Kamala Harris was elected president of the United States, because our elite recognize as each day goes by that is increasingly unlikely. There's nothing that happened this weekend that changes the trajectory that Donald Trump looks likely to sweep to a relatively easy electoral college victory in about 25 days. So Kamala Harris was using her weekend campaign appearances to berate Donald Trump for not releasing his medical records. So for more than half the country that do not own their own homes and that do not have 401k plans, right, this is a tough economy. And her campaign of joy and vibes is just entirely inappropriate for people who are struggling. There are all sorts of rules in Judaism about what to say when you visit a mourner's house. And the rules are designed to make the process as easy and as clear for all parties. And people are mourning the death of their dreams. They are mourning the nasty state of their finances. They are mourning the decline in their living standards under the Biden administration. And so to go to mourners and tell them, join me in a campaign of joy, just doesn't ring right. So why has Donald Trump and the Republicans laser focused on immigration? Right? Because there is a strong sense of outrage, right, stronger in years among Americans about illegal immigration in particular, but also about immigration in general. Right? You are not a superior human being. You are not more elevated, more wise if you welcome immigration. And you're not a superior human being if you have a great fear of outgroups and a great fear of immigration and you want to crack down on illegal immigration. Whatever your perspective on immigration, it does not bestow upon you the mantle of righteousness. Right? Some people have a stronger fear reaction. Right? Some people probably have a bigger amygdala, right? That section of your brain that fires up when you feel under threat. And so having a bigger than normal clit, or bigger than normal penis, or a bigger than normal amygdala does not make you a bad person or a good person. There's nothing inferior about you if you have an above average fear of outgroups. Now, that can be maladaptive in certain settings, in certain professions. To act on your predisposition may not be a winning formula. All right, but there's nothing inherent in your morality that makes you inferior because you distrust outgroups. And so most of the media discourse on immigration and on race relations just takes it for granted that people who fear the different or have a negative disposition towards strangers are somehow bad. And it's just part of the overall package and how the news media and our liberal elite don't give Trump supporters a fair shake. Right? People who fear strangers, who hate illegal immigration, right? They are not deformed. They are not inferior forms of human beings. They are not in need of anti-bigotry education. They simply experience life differently than you do. Just as cosmopolitan people who live various places around the world and enjoy jetting off to Aspen and to Switzerland and to Dubai, they're not inferior either, right? They just have a different experience of life. They have a different set of strengths and weaknesses. They are probably higher in openness than the average person, while conservatives are higher in conscientiousness and hence have a more intense fear of disorder. So I recommend this Axios series on what Trump will do, particularly if Republicans take back the US Senate and hold the House of Representatives, because there's no longer never Trump component to Republicans, right? Never Trump Republicans have been drummed out of federal political life. So Donald Trump has command of the Republican Party, and there's no opposition there. And so they are going to be far more cohesive and effective this time round. I'm critical of the way Donald Trump operated in his first term. Overall, I think he did a good job, but he left a lot of issues unresolved, and things are aligning this term so that he should be more effective. Okay, let's have a look at the chat. Festive Indigenous Peoples Day, my favorite day of the year. Is this a federal holiday? It's all about the laws, bro. What are the average penis and clit sizes? I have a 9.5 amygdala. So there's a good article in Axios that has a wider application, and it's about the war by the White House press secretary on the White House National Security spokesman John Kirby. So the press secretary, Jean-Pierre, right, she's the beneficiary of affirmative action. She did not attain her position on the basis of merit. She's not particularly good at her job. And do you know why she does not want John Kirby appearing with her at White House press briefings? This would never have occurred to me. Right? If you'd asked me that question and given me an hour to sketch out reasons, it wouldn't have occurred to me. But she doesn't want John Kirby appearing at her White House press briefings because it makes her feel like she is being chaperoned. Right? If she had attained her position on merit, this fear that she was being chaperoned would never have occurred to her. Right? If I attained a position on merit and there was a need for somebody else to appear with me at my position, it would never occur to me, even if the other person had more experience or was more intelligent or more educated or more verbally gifted than me or more socially connected, it would never occur to me that I was being chaperoned. Right? I have a clear sense of my strengths and weaknesses. Not a perfect sense, right? My strengths and weaknesses get revealed to me every day anew, and sometimes the revelations are painful. But I can't recall feeling like I was being chaperoned. Can you get into the psyche of someone like Karine Jean-Pierre, where she feels like the presence of John Kirby, who is more experienced, who is more intelligent, who is more verbally gifted, is more sophisticated, is more educated, is more competent than her, and she resents how bad she looks by comparison. I guess this is akin to one reason why men don't want a woman with a high body count. because the best way to maintain a good relationship with your wife and not fear that she's going to cheat on you or leave you is to be the best lover she's ever had. And so the more love she's had, the more likely you are not to be the best lover she's ever had. And so a great gauge for how much a woman loves you is by how willing she is to be a dirty slut with you in the bedroom. And so many men, I think, get into a relationship and get married, and their wife isn't terribly enthusiastic in the bedroom. And they also recognize that she has quite a body count behind her. And they recognize that she was giving it up for all sorts of guys in the past in a way that she will not do for them. So, on the one hand, it seems trivial whether or not a woman will take a load down her throat or in her butt for you. But it reflects how much she loves you, how much she desires you, and that's going to go a long way to keeping the relationship. And if she's had 20 previous sex partners, the odds are only about 5% that you are going to be the best lover she's ever had. If she's had no sex partners, she's a virgin, the odds are 100% that you're going to be the best lover she's ever had. And so you're going to be more likely to have a hold on her. I don't think it works the same way for guys. A guy could have 50 sex partners and recognize that they'd rocked his world in various ways, that they would be willing to do things and perform things and have skills with things that his wife doesn't, but that's not going to be the same determinant factor for men, because men are not as driven by their emotions as women. But getting back to Karine Jean-Pierre, she knows that John Kirby is simply far better at the job of speaking to the news media than she is, and that drives her crazy, and so she's fighting back and doing everything she can to prevent him taking up space at White House briefings. And the ridiculous way the Obama administration tried to spin this earlier this year was that the Middle East was declining in importance, and that's why John Kirby wasn't appearing at the podium with KJP. But the Middle East is expanding in importance. It's not declining in importance. And I think this also sheds light on Vice President Kamala Harris. She has the same sort of insecurity manifested by KJP. And so she goes to ridiculous lengths to try to shore herself up by having all the staff line up and say good morning to her, and not allowing them to look at her, to abuse them, to be unable to retain staff because she treats them so badly. And when she makes a mistake, right, when a secure person makes a mistake, it's far easier for him to say, oh, I made a mistake, when an insecure person makes a mistake. Right, so let's say I'm at a job and I fear I could get fired and I make a mistake. I'm going to be strongly incentivized to escape blame as much as possible for that mistake. On the other hand, if I feel secure in my job, I'm going to say to the boss, hey, that was my mistake. That's on me. And so Kamala Harris, due to a chronic insecurity, wants to blame all her problems on other people, because to accept responsibility would just be unbearable. It would be to look in the mirror and know that she did not earn her position as Vice President of the United States on the basis of merit, and that she's not qualified to be president, that she doesn't have the material to be president, and her long affirmative action ride appears coming to a humiliating end. Bro, it's my birthday. Happy birthday, Kayla. Thank you so much for subscribing. So another thing that is explained by Kamala Harris's insecurity is how she holds on to mundane things that she says and lays them out there and then expects applause or just seizes on certain talking points, right? If you are insecure taking questions, right, you will be highly likely to just fall back on your memorized talking points. And so there's a lack of flexibility in Kamala Harris's reaction to questions that is quite different from Donald Trump. So Donald Trump certainly has his weaknesses. He can be baited, and Kamala Harris did a very effective job of baiting him during the debate. But Donald Trump can be devastatingly funny because he can be in the moment and have a sense of reality. What's the funniest thing that Kamala Harris has ever said? That's what's so disturbing about her laugh, is that it's usually in reaction to comments that are not funny. I expect in private Kamala Harris perhaps has a terrific sense of humor and can be quite funny and gracious and in the moment, but you certainly never get that sense in her public pronouncements. So Adam Gopnik has a long essay in The New Yorker about how horrible it will be when Donald Trump is elected president. And he talks about two strands of thought on the left, the minimizers and the maximizers. The minimizers say it won't be so terrible if Donald Trump is elected president, the country will go on. And the maximizers say it'll be the end of American democracy. And who's right? Well, I recognize varying degrees of truth in many of the democratic criticisms of Trump, right? He is a deeply flawed man, and there likely are situations where his flaws and predispositions will not align with America's best interests. And Trump's election denial was disgusting, but at no point did Donald Trump's protests over the 2020 election, and at no point in the January 6th protest was there ever a possibility that the election would be overturned. So you hear this rhetoric in the news media that thank God our institutions held this time, but there's no guarantee it'll happen again. Well, there was absolutely zero chance that Donald Trump's attempts to subvert the 2020 election outcome could have succeeded. There was zero chance that the January 6th riot could have turned into a full-on coup. There's no chance. And so I think there is no chance that American democracy will be ended by a Donald Trump presidency. And there's no chance that Donald Trump will be some authoritarian despot. Donald Trump loves a good fight. There's absolutely nothing in Donald Trump's first term that makes you think that Donald Trump will be some despotic, power-hungry dictator just looking to wipe out all opposition to him. Donald Trump thrives on opposition. He loves a good fight. And so I recognize the validity of many of the left-wing critiques of Donald Trump, but the idea that democracy will come to an end in the United States if Trump is elected bears absolutely no relationship to reality. And this considerable element of the left-wing critique of Trump that is completely removed from reality is why there's going to be a major left-wing mental health crisis after Trump's election. It's just going to be shattering for people. I mean, thousands of people are going to be able to get out of bed and go to work on the left. Because people on the left, far more than people on the right, get their meaning and purpose, their energy, their enthusiasm, and their social connections from political activism. People on the right tend to get their meaning and purpose from their family, their community, their friends, their hobbies, and their work. Very few right-wingers lead lives completely obsessed with politics. I wish I could be like you, easily amused. Why am I so out of breath? I need to work on my cardio, bro. Yeah, the next president will get to pick 2 new justices on the Supreme Court. So I noticed the mainstream media loves to talk about how the US Supreme Court has become an illegitimate institution, but this is only in the eyes of Democrats, right? Democrats loved the Supreme Court, and Democrats in general love rule by judges when that accords with their political preferences. But when it doesn't accord with their political preferences, then they're outraged. So most political actors like the shortest route to power. And if the route to power is through the courts, then they'll welcome that. If the route to power is through the legislature, they'll welcome that. If it's through executive decisions, they'll welcome that. It's just that the rhetoric that they use to make their case will change depending on the circumstance. And the circumstance is, what's the shortest route and most effective route to power for the group that I belong to? And Republicans have retaken the Supreme Court and stocked it with conservatives as the result of a very well-funded and well-organized campaign, including setting up branches of the Federalist Society at all major law schools in the United States. And after 2020, Republicans had great fear about the future of freedom of speech, and libertarians had same fears, and so we had the growth of alternative platforms such as Rumble and Odyssey, and we had Elon Musk taking back Twitter to expand the range of free speech in social media platforms. Sean Spicer did a big show last night on the road to 270. So once you get 270 electoral votes, you are the next president of the United States. So we talked to leading Republicans in 13 of the battleground states, and he says he's come away from those conversations more convinced than ever that Donald Trump is on a glide path to victory, while recognizing at the same time that the Democrats do have many advantages. They do have a better funded ground game, and you can't build a ground game in the final 3 weeks. But voter registration has been tilting Republican in most of the battleground states. So Sean Spicer feels more each day that Donald Trump is on a glide path to victory. And then the Democratic activist on Mark Halperin's morning show, he despairs at the Kamala Harris messaging. He wonders, why are they so disconnected from the concerns of swing voters? That Kamala Harris was attacking Donald Trump for not talking to 60 Minutes, which is incredibly rich coming from Kamala Harris, who had reluctance to give any interviews, has only completely changed her media strategy now that she's falling behind in the polls. And so she's wasting her time on the campaign trail berating Trump for not appearing on 60 Minutes and berating Trump for not releasing his medical records. But none of that has anything to do with those Americans who don't own a home, don't have a 401k plan, and therefore have experienced a decline in living standards during the Biden presidency. So when Kamala Harris went on The View and said that she wouldn't do anything different from Joe Biden, within an hour, Donald Trump had cut that excerpt and released it as a campaign message, as a campaign ad. It's just hard to believe how tone deaf she is. And so what accounts for someone being as tone deaf as Kamala Harris? Like, how is someone so oblivious to the task before them? Right? How would she run on a campaign of joy when so many Americans are in a miserable position and a campaign of joy doesn't speak to them? Well, the more you're out of touch with yourself, the more deluded you are, the more insecure you are, all right, the less ability you'll have to read other people, right? When you recognize your own weaknesses and your own strengths, right, then when someone else says something that doesn't make sense, you will quickly realize that they're either lying or deluded. But if you are in a state of delusion, if you are unable to face that you are the affirmative action, the DEI candidate, that you did not achieve your position on merit, and it's only by affirmative action, DEI, and the peculiarities of the Democratic Party that you are the Democratic Party candidate for President of the United States. And if you're unwilling to face that honestly, openly, you will be operating in a state of delusion. But I know from my own experiences of living in delusion, I would wake up at 2 a.m. and see the frightening truth. So when my life was not going in a good direction, I'd often wake up at 2 a.m., 3 a.m. with stunning moral clarity that would make me feel terrible. I'd recognize that my life was off track and I couldn't escape from it. So even when you're in a state of delusion, you'll often have your conscience prick you. You'll often have someone say something to you that bursts your bubble. That when you rest and relax and your defenses come down, then all those painful parts of reality that you've been denying will just come rushing back. And you'll have no defenses and you'll get flooded. And what we see with Kamala Harris in a campaign performance is someone who's flooded. She'll look up when she's lost, when the teleprompter breaks down, when she's confronted with a question and she's forgotten the appropriate answer. She will just start spilling out words upon words upon words that don't connect. John Podhoretz made a funny comment that sounds like she's just reading her speeches phonetically because they don't land. They're not resonating. The words don't seem to have any meaning to her. And let's go to the chat. It wasn't President Obama's decision to leave the judicial vacancies, right? The Republican Majority Leader McConnell took credit for the strategy. Yeah, he made it difficult. Republicans made it difficult because they ran the Senate. And it looks like Republicans are about to retake the Senate. A vote for Trump, we will be like living in Russia. He wants to change the Constitution so he can stay in power just like Putin. My God. So why do people believe ridiculous things like that? It makes their life more exciting. I mean, imagine how empty your life must be that you have to turn to the prospect of Donald Trump taking America to a police state like Russia. And that's the fantasy that you need to inject some excitement and some passion into your life. If you were married with kids and had normal human relationships with your family, if you had a career that you found challenging, if you had friends and community, right, you wouldn't need to make up these absurd fantasies to get a sense of excitement in your life. The best source for excitement in your life is having kids, having family, having friends, being part of a community, developing a career and an education. And these are healthy sources of excitement. But if you don't have those healthy sources of excitement in your life, you're going to have to come up with conspiracy theories to just make life more exciting. It's a big warning sign that something's terribly wrong with your life when you're chasing excitement. And I know, because I have spent much of my life chasing excitement. And it's because my life was empty. I was not succeeding with my career, with my finances, with my relationships, with my community, with my family. And so the more empty my life, the more desperate I was for a sense of excitement. So I might watch pornography or become obsessed with sports or watch untold numbers of action movies or indulge in conspiracy thinking. I would seek, more and more intense outlets for stimulation and excitement, because on my own I was not comfortable. But when you're at ease with yourself and you enjoy productive relationships with the people most important to you, you don't need to go manufacturing excitement and bizarre scenarios where Donald Trump or Kamala Harris turns America into a hellhole. The odds are, for most Americans, most of the time, it won't matter much who the next president of the United States is. If Donald Trump were to lose, Republican voters would feel sad about it for a few days, and then they'd return their focus to their families, to their work, to their communities, to their religion, to their hobbies, and they would just go on. So there's a lot of talk about the prospects for violence after this election. I doubt that we will reach the level of violence that we had in the 60s and 70s, where you had the Weather Underground setting off bombs all over the United States. We dreamed up January 6th. January 6th was a disgusting riot. I would like to see all the participants in that riot, as well as the Black Lives Matter riots that broke the law, I'd like to see them prosecuted. But at no point did January 6th threaten the transition of power. What bothered me about January 6th was Trump supporters beating up on cops and trespassing and despoiling the US Capitol and going into places and damaging them where they did not belong at that point. It was ugly. But at no point was there ever a prospect that this would end the transition of power. Right? It was an ugly riot. It was terrible behavior. But the January 6th rioters didn't kill anyone. So compared to the number of lives taken by Black Lives Matter and Antifa, right, the January 6th riots are not on the same page. They're not on the same scale. Right? Black Lives Matter riots did billions of dollars worth of damage to the United States, and they disrupted the lives of tens of millions of people. Right? The January 6th riots were not on the same scale. But I am a strict law enforcement dude. Anyone who punches a policeman, fights with a policeman, I don't care what the police do to you in response. Am I happy now? Yes. Just me and my video cam. Am I happy now? Yes. Because let me take that seriously. I know you mean it as in all likelihood as a put down. But when I'm talking to you on my iPhone, right, I'm not just talking to you. Right? I have friends of mine who watch some of my streams and comment on them. I have a sense of the people who are in my life who might watch this and who might comment on it and who might have other perspectives. And so I'm not walking alone right now. I have a sense of my closest friends and acquaintances and family, relatives, members of a religious community who at times watch, listen, comment, read what I write. So when I wake up sometimes at 2 a.m. to start writing or reading or preparing for a video or cutting video shorts, right, I have a sense of the people who are most important to me. And so I am embedded in a social world, and the words that I choose, right, are chosen from within that particular social fabric. I don't speak a different way when I'm walking alone talking to my iPhone than I do when I am with friends at a sports bar, when I'm with friends hiking at the beach, when I'm sharing work with a fellow Alexander Technique teacher, when I'm talking to someone on a bus, when I run into people I know at UCLA or USC. Right? I try to follow the dictum that everybody knows everything. So I'm not trying to hide myself on these live streams. I'm not presenting a different side of myself compared to my regular day. Right? I take a sense of the people who are most important to me with me everywhere I go. And so the words that I choose are the same words that I'd choose if they were broadcast at Dodger Stadium. So what a magnificent victory for the Dodgers. I think they won 9-0. They've had 22 innings of blanking their opponents. Right? Dodger pitching has suddenly become formidable in their last 3 outings. Not a put down. Yeah, curious about your choices to be public. So I deliberately choose not to use a device to make the picture steadier, because I notice other people find that offensive, right? It's not disruptive to walk down the street talking to an iPhone, but it is disruptive when you put your iPhone on a device to produce a steadier picture, and then other people feel it as an invasion of their space. Do you know what's crazy? If technology didn't exist as we know it, you would be a man walking by himself, talking into a metal box. Well, if this technology didn't exist, I would be using this time in a different way. Oh, so back to the question, am I happy now? Yeah, so the primary source of my happiness comes from my friends and my readers and the people that I get to interact with thanks to my blog posts and videos. I think more clearly when I think out loud socially and get reaction from people, get challenges, get rebuttals, refutations. I get to refine my understanding of the world when I do it out loud like this. And that's a big source of the happiness in my life. So probably something approaching half of my happiness comes from my online efforts and the reading and the work that goes into them, and then the friendships that form from them, the face-to-face connections that develop, the community that I get to be a part of, and knowing that if something I say affects somebody's life, in all likelihood it will be in a positive direction rather than a negative direction. So I don't fear running into people on the street who watch my show. So my definition of happiness is looking forward to the day ahead. And pretty much every day I wake up, I'm looking forward to the day ahead. So it's on that basis that I would say that I'm happy. Where am I from? I am from Kurrambong, Australia. I was born in Kurri Kurri, and I've lived in California since 1977. It's brave, but very public. I'm not in the share everything generation. So I'm not using my booming projected voice. I'm speaking softly, and one reason I don't turn the camera on me is because I've got the iPhone right up against my mouth, right? I'm speaking with the mic less than an inch from my mouth, the phone less than an inch from my mouth, to give superior audio quality. But also, I do not want to disrupt the lives of people around me. I don't want to cause any distress or disruption or just any disturbance to people as I walk down the street. So I speak probably more softly than most people do when they're just talking on the phone to a friend. So in the one sense, this is public, I'm sharing my thoughts, but in another sense, I'm doing it in a way that doesn't inconvenience or disturb those that I might pass on the street. Right? People in these homes beside me, they can't hear me talking because I've got the mic right up against my mouth and I can speak softly and I don't have to disturb other people. If I realized that this kind of live stream was disturbing inconvenience and reducing the quality of life for other people, I wouldn't do it. I am walking in Westwood, so right near UCLA. You need a dog. I love dogs, but I don't want the responsibility of taking care of a dog. I just want to be able to read my books. Yeah, are the banks open today? I don't know. Good question. So is this a federal holiday? I don't think it is. I miss the good old Columbus Day of the past. So this time around, compared to 2016, Republicans do appear to have their act together. Right? They have concrete plans on what they want to do when they take power in the Senate and the presidency. They have a united and cohesive party that's working together. Diversity means that we don't have much in common. So Republicans are not terribly diverse in that sense. They are largely united around a MAGA agenda. And so I would expect that Republicans will be far more effective in passing legislation and making changes in the US civil service. Now, these changes could be for good or for ill. There is a Republican tendency to think that everything the government does is mediocre and stupid, and that's obviously a terrible attitude. The government performs many valuable functions, so the success of Donald Trump's presidency will overwhelmingly come down to personnel. Now, in the transition in 2016, after Donald Trump defeated Hillary Clinton, right, people like Chuck Johnson were running the transition team and selecting personnel for the Trump administration. And one of the biggest weaknesses of the first Trump term was the personnel were not exactly fitted to Donald Trump, right? They were not on board with a MAGA agenda. In fact, they were frequently trying to subvert Donald Trump's agenda at every opportunity. So it appears this time the conservatives have their act together, that they have vetted thousands of people to take over key government positions and redirect the government along a MAGA direction. Now, if the people that they appoint are more competent and more effective than those who they are succeeding, then that will go a long way towards an effective Trump presidency. If they are less competent, that will reduce the effectiveness, obviously, of a Trump presidency. Okay, banks and post offices are closed today. Another striking thing about Kamala Harris's campaign is that she doesn't seem to be campaigning particularly hard. Right, she has a lighter schedule than Donald Trump. So as a Republican, I was discouraged by John McCain's essential unwillingness to contest the 2008 election. He wouldn't go after Barack Obama for his America hating posture. And I think Republican voters during the primaries would have liked to have known that Donald Trump had no, that John McCain had no real interest in contesting the 2008 election. And I think Democrats are not in good spirits because they do not see Kamala Harris waging an effective or energetic campaign. Sometimes you can get some morale boost simply by your candidate acting energetically, even if she's not acting effectively. But Democrats are discouraged that Kamala Harris does not appear to be either acting effectively or energetically, and there's no sense that her campaign understands the things it's been doing wrong, or if they are simply able to reshape their candidate. It's interesting how much effort Kamala Harris and her campaign are putting into winning black male votes. They're concerned that Donald Trump's made a significant inroads into the black community. Now, significant means 15%. Right now it appears that Donald Trump will get about 15% of the black vote. He got about 8% in 2020, and I think he got about 5% in 2016. And so the Kamala Harris campaign is spending a lot of energy and resources trying to recapture the black vote, which is curious because this election is going to come down to the Rust Belt and to the white working class. And so all the attention that they give to reclaiming the black vote is attention that they're not directing towards the voters who will decide this election. The voters in Pennsylvania in particular, also Michigan, Wisconsin, Georgia, North Carolina. Where am I walking to? I am just meandering around UCLA. So the more cognitive resources I devote to figuring out what I'm going to say on this live stream, Stroll stream, right, the fewer resources I have to deciding where I'm going to walk. Also, I prefer deserted streets than streets filled with people, because I don't want to disturb other people. I'm reluctant to use my phone in public spaces or to take calls in public spaces because I know I find it disruptive when I'm in a public space and you only hear one side of a telephone call. So I'm putting a priority on, number one, the cognitive resources to generate and refine my ideas to share with you. And then second, I prefer a deserted street to a busy street. I stopped my stroll streams for months because I used to hold the camera on a device. I'm forgetting the name for this simple device to provide a superior picture where it wouldn't bounce around. So right now, unfortunately, the picture bounces around because I'm just holding my iPhone rather than having it on a device that makes the picture smooth. But I notice when I put my iPhone on a device and then do a stroll stream, it disturbs other people. Right? They find it an intrusion. Well, if I'm just walking down the street talking into my iPhone right now, I never sense any distress or disturbance from other people. And so other people get a big vote in how I act, how I speak. right? That's why I say things on this live stream that I'd say in all other areas of my life, though I wouldn't talk on politics or controversial areas and where that was inappropriate. But I recognize that someone might listen to this stream and I might encounter them just walking down the street. And so I configure this live stream to fit my life rather than reshaping my life to fit my live streams. But I am about a mile from UCLA, so there are a lot of UCLA students who live here. I love these clean streets. I love Westwood. We're about 5 miles from Santa Monica. So Israelis would overwhelmingly prefer Donald Trump. Laura notes, I want a leader in the White House who serves the people, not themselves. A grifter cannot be fit to serve. Well, it depends on the degree of the grift. I will admit that there is a way too large component of grifter in Donald Trump and his family. And I don't like it, and it embarrasses me. And much of Donald Trump's behavior embarrasses me. His cyber currency promotion, his selling Trump Bibles is incredibly distasteful. I find Donald Trump very embarrassing, but I still think he would be the superior president. Every intelligent person I've met while traveling thinks America is a laughingstock for supporting Trump. Well, it depends on what circles you mix with. Right? The more educated the circle, the more likely they are to have derision for Donald Trump. So every nation likes to think it's superior, and Europeans and Australians have all sorts of reasons for saying that America's a laughingstock, but America's economy is far outstripping the economies of its rivals, and America is relatively more powerful to China and Japan and Russia than it was 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 7 years ago, and is on a path to be even more powerful in the next 50 years than it has been in the previous 50 years. You're talking politics in California, I'd be avoiding people too. No, I'm not like, I don't bring politics up in casual conversation. Obviously, most people here are liberals. Much more deserted streets in LA than more pedestrian-centered cities such as New York, probably. Yeah, people in LA will jump in the car to go to the gym half a mile away. You're very considerate of other people. Well, I try to be, but I recognize I have huge blind spots, and it's often brought to my attention in incredibly embarrassing fashion. So I just budged into a couple of people talking the other day because I wanted to tell them something, and I didn't consider that they had their own thing going on. Or I notice how often I'll want help and I'll go directly ask for help, but I'll get quite annoyed when other people interrupt me and ask for my help. So it's important for me to be considerate of myself, and that then changes the way that I interact with other people and makes me more considerate of others, because I cannot be considerate of myself if I am treating other people in a careless and offensive fashion. I remember my therapist kept trying to drill home a point to me: when you offend people, Luke, you are hurting them. And I would take such glee out of needlessly, gratuitously offending people just to show myself that I was smarter and superior to them. But that did not work to my advantage. I'd constantly test people by seeing how much I could offend them. It was not a good life strategy. Yeah, this is a time when talking politics socially is dangerous. But here's something I found. If people like you, you can get away with a lot more. Like if a woman loves you, you can almost say anything. And if you can talk about things in a humorous fashion, then you can often talk politics. So if I talk politics with people who don't share my politics, I try to do it in a joking, amused fashion. And then it seems to rarely cause offense. I certainly never argue politics. It's been months and months since I've gotten into an argument over politics in real life. I'm voting for Donald Trump because he's the only one that can save our country and save us. The 1350 dog whistle. There's no dog whistle there. Different groups have different strengths and different weaknesses. So I'm thinking of my own group that we've committed a disproportionate amount of insider trading on Wall Street. We also contribute a disproportionate amount of philanthropy. So there's a lot of great behavior by Jews, mediocre behavior by Jews, and bad behavior by Jews. Blacks make outsized contributions to parts of American life, and they make outsized challenges and problems in other parts of American life. Trump won't release his medical records. Why not? I suspect he believes it is in his interest not to release his medical records, that it enables him to exaggerate what they say, and it enables him to feel more protected, to keep that information to himself. I do not think that reflects well on Donald Trump. He should release his medical records. Right? That's one decision among many that I don't like by Trump. So I live primarily among Orthodox Jews, and Orthodox Jews are about 4-1 voting for Donald Trump, it appears. And similar ratio for evangelical Christians, I would expect. So we have, speaking of different people who have different gifts, I think the Denver Broncos has the first white starting cornerback in the National Football League since Jason Sehorn played for the New York Giants around, 2002, 2003 when he retired. And the starting white cornerback, I believe for the Broncos, he even had an interception a game or two ago. But normally when you have a white cornerback playing college football, he tends to get redirected to playing safety because there are assumptions in college football that cornerback is a black position. And so too, the best white players in the NBA, they often develop late. They often come out of Europe. So blacks tend to physically develop faster than whites, and so whites will be at a considerable disadvantage in high school basketball in many American schools, even college basketball. So whites will develop slower, and so many of America's best white professional basketball players come from Europe, where they weren't getting dominated and then having their confidence destroyed going up against faster developing groups during their teen years. So listening to the Mark Halperin show twice a day, it really does put you well ahead of the curve, because you see mounting panic now in the mainstream media about Kamala Harris's chances. Right, the same panic was displayed and explained effectively on Mark Halperin's show a month ago. So remember when you'd read the Drudge Report, often to get ahead of the news? You'd read the Drudge Report to get the under news, the items that hadn't yet emerged above ground in the polite news media. Now you're getting that on Mark Halperin's show. So he talked about 7 weeks ago how Kamala Harris had never been thoroughly vetted. And we're getting more and more stories now about Doug Emhoff, her husband, and how he would speak to his female employees in a lewd way, that he would select female attorneys, he would hire female attorneys in large part based on their looks, that he would provide superior treatment to the attractive female employees, that he was a bit of a heavy drinker and even smacked around this liberal Jewish woman that he was dating and taken to the Cannes Festival. And so I wonder how much Kamala Harris's team knew about Doug Emhoff's dark past, and it's so curious that they would use him as the voice of the new masculinity when he has such a lurid and unseemly past with women, impregnating the nanny, then paying her off $80,000 with a non-disclosure agreement. Why was Doug Emhoff available for Kamala Harris to marry him? Because his affairs had destroyed his first marriage. So, quite curious. It shows to me terrible judgment on the part of Kamala Harris's team that they would employ Doug Emhoff as the voice of the new masculinity, given that they must have known about his incredibly lurid background. So there's similar behavior in Orthodox Judaism. Thinking about a rabbi in Los Angeles who would overwhelmingly select young female speakers, largely on the basis of their looks, and would proposition them. Now, we know that Donald Trump has pretty lurid past of his own, and it seems that he makes the looks of his female attorneys a priority. So I'm amazed that they've been as effective as they have been. Or is it just Trump luck? Because you keep reading in the news media about all the stupid, legal mistakes that Trump's attractive female attorneys were making, and yet the end results have usually ended up being pretty positive for him. Yeah, Kamala Harris got into public politics having an affair with Willie Brown, right? A married man. And he gave her jobs that paid really well for very little work, and he put his political organization at her disposal. So she slept her way into politics, and she benefited from affirmative action. And there weren't many deputy attorney generals who are ending up in the gossip column of the San Francisco Chronicle in the early 2000s, but Kamala Harris was, right? She was ambitious, and there are many salacious stories about her in San Francisco because she was not earning her position the traditional way through competence and hard work. Instead, she was serving Willie Brown in a variety of positions.